Okay, I've let my painting dry for about an hour or so, so the paper should feel dry. And now I'm going to add more detail, so I have my same colors in my tray, and I'm going to use a drier brush. So now I'm going to use wet on dry, and what this is going to do is start to give my object, my salt, my pepper shaker, more form. So when I started at the beginning, the paint was very wet, and now the brush is dipped in the paint, the watercolor, but the brush is very dry. In watercolor, we always want to work light to dark. It's very difficult, almost impossible, in fact, to work from dark to light or to remove pigment. So I want to be sure that as I'm adding my second or my layers of wash in my detail, that I'm looking at my value drawing, and I don't want to paint over everything. Some things should stay the values that I had from the first time, but my details are giving the object form. And so I want to be sure that I'm using washes from all of my colors that I have mixed up on my tray, not just my red, not just my red orange. If I need a darker value, I'm going to use a darker color from my tray that is more to the red. And I want to keep in mind where those highlights are. And so I'm gradually building up the form and the detail. Now, in many places, it's nice to have a contrast between hard edges and soft edges. If I want a soft edge, I can rinse my brush, and again, I'm using the brush pretty dry, so I can take out some of the water with my paper towel, and I can come back in and just barely touch the edge with the damp brush, and that will soften the edge, so it will become more wet into wet and soften that edge. The edge will disappear. And because I'm working with watercolor, I cannot pick up my painting and hold it up when the paper is wet, but you can see where the paper is wet, where it is more shiny. That is where I have the majority of the water. And then as I'm giving my object form, if I need even more detail, I might have to come back and let my paper dry again even more. So I want to be conscious of and be aware of the fact that I'm not outlining. It's very easy to get into the outlining mode. And we always want to be able to see our pencil lines and the texture of our watercolor paper. So I'm trying to keep in mind the form of the pepper grinder. And I think down here where the peppercorns are, it might be nice to do a little wet into wet. So I'll let some of the peppercorns sort of fade into each other. If I get too much pigment, I can dry out my brush and lift some of the color back up. So I'm sort of using the brush as a, not really a sponge, but kind of a sponge. And I think that's about done. Now, when the whole painting is dry, if I decide that this light yellow area is too bright, I can take a light wash and tone it down a little bit by just glazing over. Glazing means using a light layer of watercolor over the top. It's a little bit too high contrast, so I think that works better. And I might need to do a similar thing down here with my, I've got my wax resist, but it's a little bit too bright here next to my highlights. I don't need to go over every line, as I said, in outline, because my brain will visually do that, complete those lines and complete that darkness. I need a little more dark up here, a little more dark over here to complete that. And I think, let's put a little more yellow on this side. I think that's pretty good. Okay, so that's it. Watercolor is going to dry lighter than you think it is. So after it dries, if you notice that it needs a little more dark value, then we would come back and add, again, with pretty controlled brush strokes, pretty controlled paint, so less water, and I think that's pretty good. I cannot tip my paper up because it's wet, but I can stand up and look at it. I might turn it sideways and look at it, or I might turn it upside down and look at it. What that does is that helps us see the value. And when I turn it upside down, I notice that I need a little bit more dark on the edges. Again, still transparent. And I'm not outlining, I'm just putting that in a few places to kind of hit those values. Maybe just a little bit there. Okay, and that's done. So we should have a combination of soft edges and hard edges, and then we're going to let our paper dry. Probably it will have to dry overnight, so if you have little helpers at home, be sure to put it up high on a counter, somewhere where it's going to dry. And then remember that our very last thing, so that we have a clean tray next time, is to use your paper towel to wipe out your tray, because on our next painting we're going to use cool colors and we do not want those colors to mix. Now, if you have used lots and lots of water, you might need to get a second paper towel or tissue. The watercolors inside the box are pretty wet, so you may also want to leave the lid open, or you could maybe set it up on top of the refrigerator or something so they're out of the way. And then, of course, remember to rinse your brush, squeeze out the extra water. If you have splashed water or color on something else, be sure and rinse it out. If it's on yourself, rinse it out with cold water. And next time we're going to do our cool painting. Your painting might have more yellow or yellow-orange washes, and that's fine. But remember, we're developing our painting using essentially our three warm colors: orange, yellow, and red, and then different values and combinations of them. So we use the red orange, the yellow orange, and everything in between. Happy painting!